the 76th UN General Assembly opened in New York, Chinese President announced a roadmap to take China's cooperation with the UN to a new level. While US President said the US is not seeking a new Cold War. What are the key takeaways from their remarks? And we have an exclusive interview on the role of education in the Hong Kong SAR with the principal of a local high school. Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. President Xi Jinping's address at the general debate of the 76th UN General Assembly on Tuesday was a special occasion. This year marks the centenary of the founding of the Communist Party of China and also the 50th anniversary of the restoration of China's lawful seat in the UN. President Xi outlined a four-point plan to take China's cooperation with the UN to a new level. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden said in his address that the US is not seeking a new Cold War. What are the main takeaways from their remarks and what implications will these words have on the future of the world? Joining me today are University Professor Huang Jing, Dean of the Institute of International and Regional Studies in Beijing, and from Urumqi, Xinjiang, our current affairs commentator, Einar Tangen. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Now, President Xi said that the world has entered a period of new turbulence and transformation. It falls on each and every responsible statesman to answer the questions of our times and make a historical choice with confidence, courage, and a sense of mission. Professor Huang, what exactly does it mean by the new turbulence and transformation?
Of course, we are facing the pandemic, that's one, and also we know that climate change has also caused some very bad weather, extreme weather all over the world. We also have some man-made mistakes that also, have a negative impact on peace and stability. For example, the armed intervention into others' affairs, trying to form a small so-called circles or alliance targeting a third country, and also a kind of mentality of zero-sum game, say others gain us my loss. This kind of so-called, confrontation-oriented thinking and decision also add to turbulence and the turmoil that we're facing today.
One of Xi's points is about strengthening solidarity and promoting mutual respect and win-win cooperation in conducting international relations. Einar, he said that democracy is not a special right reserved to any individual country, but a right for the people of all countries to enjoy. Recent developments in the global situation show once again that military intervention from the outside and so-called democratic transformation entail nothing but harm. Einar, what is he referring to here?
Well, he's talking about the fact that the U.S. has American exceptionalism, this idea that only one size fits all, that democratic liberal capitalism is the only way that any country can go forward. And it's not true. The last 40 years have shown quite succinctly that the U.S. and Europe have moved sideways, whereas China has forged ahead with a different system. Now, that system is not a threat to the U.S. or Europe. It is simply a different system. But for many in the United States, they see it as an existential threat, as something that could undermine their belief, absolute belief, that there is only one system that can rule mankind. And that's has not proven true. Afghanistan, Middle East, South America, Africa, and now there's a threat that this kind of idea or actions are going to be moving into Asia.
And it's one of the important functions of these kind of speeches, I would say, is for Chinese president to address some of the concerns or criticism against China. For instance, he talked about one country's success does not have to mean another country's failure, and that the world is big enough to accommodate common development and progress of all countries. Professor Huang, what is he trying to address here? especially the fact that it seems some people seem to think that China is betting against the United States. Is that what he's trying to address here?
Yes, because we know that there are some countries where people think that their way is the only way to go. Any other different ways to achieve the so-called development to them is a wrong way. As a result, they try to force upon others their way of life, and so because of this kind of mentality, they say that the other people's gain is their loss or their gain is their loss. So this is just as I said before, there is some game, and this kind of mentality is a very foundation for the confrontational behavior, for the behavior that we know has done tremendous damage to human beings as a whole in the past years. The best example, of course, is a 20 years war against terror, which ended up in a lose-lose situation for everyone, especially for United States of America, who started in the first place.
Is that why China proposed, or President Xi mentioned here, a global development initiative and pledging additional $3 billion in the next years to support developing countries? Because that is something quite new and is quite substantive, and it already includes several points. Professor Huang, how significant is this announcement?
Because the fundamental thinking behind all of this, just like Xi Jinping said a couple of years ago, that is, only the world is doing well, can China doing well. Indeed, as a whole, as a human being as a whole, we all live in this village called Earth. And if one nation or one country did not do well, the others cannot really do well. And we have to enhance the entire population's living standard. Can we all be happy? And especially as shown by this pandemic, COVID pandemic, if one nation, one country is still suffering from it, then all of us in danger. So that's a kind of philosophy, that's kind of thinking behind what President Xi Jinping said, and behind his new idea to, to provide support and aid to the developing countries.
What's the difference between this one, for instance, with other initiatives that we already have? For instance, the Belt and Road. What is this global development initiative, Huang, Professor Huang?
Yeah, Belt and Road is a very specific project to promote infrastructure construction and to try to connect different nation countries together in the economic integration that we are witnessing now. But this kind of aid to the developing countries is not a kind of project. It's just a support, a help to others who are not doing very well, but who deserves a better life. And China want to provide some general good to all human beings, not just to one single project. This shows the kind of mind, the thinking, like I just said, only when every one of us on this earth is doing well, can all of us do well.
Well, President Xi also mentioned something on the green side. He said China will step up support for other developing countries in developing green and low-carbon energy and will not build new coal-fired power projects abroad. Einar, what is the significance of that? What is China pledging here?
Well, they're pledging both money, and also they're saying that, as they said, they're not going to finance any more coal plants. But, the issue here, the larger issue, is that Xi made a speech as a statesman to the world. And that's what the UN General Assembly is supposed to be about. And it's a stark contrast to what was being done by Biden, which was basically a domestic political statement on his side. There was really nothing being offered on the U.S. Xi stepped forward. And these, as the professor said, these are themes that are not new to this year. These are themes that he was echoing from 2017 when he made a speech to the Congress, and not the Congress, in Davos. Yes, I'm sorry. And these types of ideas are important. They've been around for a long time. And he's saying it's time to start. I mean, if you start looking at the U.S. defense budget, that's almost $1 trillion. 1/10 of that, 1/10, could be used to fund the global initiative against global warming. But instead of doing that, it's being used to basically try to contain China. What is the bigger threat?
Speaking of the
China.
U.S. address, President Biden said the U.S. is not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocs and is ready to work with any nation, even if we have intense disagreements in other areas. So, Professor Huang, the media is regarding this as a reference to China. What do you think? Is the assurance that the U.S. is not seeking a new Cold War credible?
Yes, maybe it's true that Joe Biden means what he said, but the policy adopted by his administration tells a different story. For example, he tried to form up or try to create a so-called coalition of shared values, a democracy, summit of democracy, and try to distinguish the right side or wrong side. Of course, United States is always on the right side. When you try to make a distinction between the good, so-called good value or bad value, a democracy or non-democracy, try to form a coalition based on ideological, lining up. That is Cold War, because when you when you claim that my way of life is a good one, the other way of life is a wrong one, when you try to use one size to fit all, and whoever is not going your way will be assumed as a challenge, a threat, we try to confront with the so-called challenges or threats. That is a kind of confrontational approach. And that approach does not explain, as Joe Biden said, that does not explain that he really does not want a Cold War.
Yeah, Einar, it seems there are some contradictions in what he says. For instance, he talks about building back the world better, and Biden also U.S. President Biden, he also talked about a global community, that as a global community, our own success is bound up in others succeeding as well. But then immediately he also continues to point a finger at other countries, including China. He said we must all call out and condemn the targeting and oppression of racial, ethnic, and religious minorities when it occurs whether it occurs in Xinjiang or northern Ethiopia or anywhere in the world, in his exact words. So it sounds like he's talking about not seeking confrontation, but on the other hand, he's naming and shaming. And on such a public global arena, how is this going to go down with China and other countries that are listening to his speech?
Well, no one's very, very happy with it, especially the introducing nuclear submarines via Australia. I mean, this is adding a very dangerous element. Remember, they're saying that these subs are only nuclear powered, but the fact is these Virginia-class submarines can be outfitted with nuclear-tipped Tomahawk missiles in just a matter of hours. As long as the missiles are there, the payload base can accommodate them. So this is setting off a chain of reactions. Indonesia has already expressed dismay. As far as the community of shared values, I don't think France is feeling that very much these days. And there are colonial gunboat diplomacy overtones here. And by that, I mean, Boris Johnson going on about like-minded English-speaking nations gathering together as, to create more warfare. It's really troubling. It could set up a chain reaction that would involve Japan and South Korea going nuclear.
Yeah. My final question, time is really short. Professor Huang, what explains the apparent disparity between what Joe Biden says here and what his administration seems to be doing?
I think that, of course, in front of the whole world, Joe Biden tried to grasp a moral high ground to show that he's doing good for everyone. But his administration policy, especially just mentioned the AUKUS, that is a so-called alliance between United States, Great Britain, and Australia. That's a very trouble, mind-boggling decision or policy, because you are not only doing nuclear proliferation here, but you are also doing this specifically targeting China, which has been peaceful, which has been undergoing a peaceful rise. And also, as said, it also set up a chain of actions in the region, which is very, very, counterproductive or even negative to regional peace and stability and to the world's peace and stability at large.
Okay, time is very little. Many thanks to my guests, Professor Huang Jing and Einar Tangen, joining us. Thank you very much.